I am the prince.
I am the pastor. Thank
You're
you.
supposed to use your preacher voice, number one. Thank you for listening to our podcast.
Thank you
We're
for
so
joining our
excited.
podcast.
Yeah, we're so excited. This is our next episode after our pilot. And guess what happens? First of all, I have to tell you that this guy that we call the pastor, some know him as Pastor Tim, some know him as Timothy Hamner Sr., originally from the East Coast. Now he lives on the West Coast.
West Coast.
And he pastors a church right there in the city of Oakland.
Yes, Oakland, California. And as Lyle was sharing with us, the Prince, believe it or not, he is a radio personality out of New Orleans. And he's been doing
a radio
this.
pronouncer.
Yeah, just like we said in the first one, a pronouncer. No, he's actually a radio station professional. I like to say it that way, of over 30 years, because when you've been doing it as long as he's been doing it, he is actually known as Prince Lyle on the radio in his hometown. And we're just happy to be here with him on this podcast known as The Prince and the Pastor. And Lyle, I'm sure you have... Go ahead.
Actually, it's called The Pastor and the Prince. That's the name of it. So, didn't want anybody to get twisted, you know. And even though the designers of our flyer have my picture bigger than his name, even, but you know, it's still The Pastor and the Prince. But listen, if you would like to connect with us, you can do that by emailing us podcast@yahogo.org. You can catch us on this platform, and please share it with others. All right. We've got a great show for you today.
Yes, we have an excellent show for you today. And before we get started with the show, again, I know Lyle was talking about the flyer. For me, it doesn't necessarily matter who goes first as long as we launch. One of the things that I shared with Lyle some time ago, I said people talk a whole lot about doing X, Y, and Z, but one of the failures that I've noticed that people do is the failure to launch or the failure to execute. So as you can see, this is our demonstration of executing our goals. We're trying to execute on a dream that we had to have a show that we can share, you know, some very interesting, positive information with our listening audience. And with that, we're going to talk about a very interesting topic here. Lyle was just about to share about what we're talking about. But Lyle, before you share what your topic is, I almost have a question, but let me have you share what the show is about. Then I want to ask my question.
Well, listen, today we're going to talk about the insurrection.
The resurrection?
The insurrection. And we'll get into what that means. We'll get into what that actually means. But around the anniversary of January 6th storming of the nation's capital, we'll discuss what's known to many many in the United States and beyond as the insurrection. So we'll talk about that.
Wait a minute.
We might even talk about
you
some funny moments.
Wait, before we go to funny, because this one's going to sound like one of our more serious shows, so I'm going to try to put on a serious face on this one. But I have a question for you. Oh, he said I won't be. Well, we'll work through it. But I have just one question that's kind of burning on the inside. Who should be held accountable for the, quote, peaceful protests or for what others might call a riot that occurred on January the 6th, 2021?
Well, Pastor Tim, before we get into that, before we get into who's accountable, let's talk about the event itself. Let's talk about what happened, define some things, and kind of set it up because apparently we can live in this society and things can go on that it seems like it's table talk. It seems like it's happening and being discussed on everybody's dinner table. But some people still don't know. Some people are still clueless as to what the current events are.
Wait, they're clueless?
Yeah, some people are clueless as to what some things are. They have no clue, no absolute clue as to what we're talking about.
And there I go with that word again. Wow. But it's unfortunate if they're clueless. Right. Interesting.
Right. We'll just leave that. because some people do say wow, and we'll let them say wow.
Exactly.
We appreciate the fact that maybe you say wow because you're speechless. You just have nothing else at the moment to think about. You have to give it some more think. Yeah, you're awestruck. You're awestruck. Well, we talked about having a word of the week, and so I want to introduce a word. That's right. I want to introduce a word called insurgency. It almost seems like emergency, but it starts with IN. So it's spelled IN as in Nancy, INSURGEN.
CY. There we go. Yeah, I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming, but that's cool. That's cool. Insurgency. That almost sounds like a 4-syllable word. Insurgency. And what does that word mean?
That is 4 syllables. Well, let's back up. First of all, you know how we do, having to go through the dictionary and all that. Let's go back to the root word. I know you like to do that.
So we're going to the root or the root?
Yeah.
Let's go to both. Let's go to both.
It's like root beer.
There you go.
Sometimes people say root beer, and some people say root beer.
You know what? I like both of them because they're going to the actual source or the foundation of the word. So let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah, the bottom of the tree.
There you go.
Dirt. All right, insurgent is where insurgency comes from, right? Okay, so insurgency is a state of being insurgent. So a person insurgent is a person who rises in forcible opposition. I'm going to take my time with this definition, all right?
That's
I'm
fine.
Be like the preacher. I'm going to take my time, y'all.
That's fine. Take your time.
All right. Take my time. You know how when most of us are ready to go in the pew and somebody we give a side eye to, we're ready to go and somebody say, take your time, pastor.
Well, that depends. Every take your time isn't take your time, but go ahead. Finish up. Go ahead.
Right. Okay. So a person who rises in forcible opposition to lawful authority, especially a person who engages in armed resistance to a government or to the execution of its laws, is also considered, in one word, a rebel.
Pause right there. They came with arms. I hope it was a coat of arms and not military style arms.
No, this is arms. Like this is a different piece. This is the piece that Medea talks about. Peace is made of steel.
I like Medea's definition of peace being made of steel.
Instead of peace be steel, peace is made of steel.
It's made of steel.
But in this case, they were coming to disturb the peace with their arms, with their armed resistance. Okay, so now let's look at the word insurgency.
Okay, let's look at insurgency. Insurrection.
Insurgency has the word insurrection as a part of the definition, which is what our show is about. Insurrection against a government. Insurrection against an existing government, usually one's own, by a group not recognized as having the status of a belligerent. So
interesting.
So now we know the word insurgency.
So we have an idea, and I see why you shared the root word first, because as we were brought up, you never use a word to define a word, but this is the dictionary that keeps doing this. So somebody forgot to tell the dictionary people not to use a word to define a word, but oh well.
Yeah. Well, now that we've gotten our word for today, insurgency. I like to, it feels like after I do the word of the day, I'm supposed to be like on Sesame Street. All right, boys and girls, say it with me. Insurgency.
Well, you could do that, but I'm grateful to our listeners that they're much older than the Sesame Street age. If they are, they can learn something positive that they might be able to use on their college SAT or something like that.
That's very true. But if they're like me, I'm like I take the Denzel Washington approach.
Ooh,
Start from the beginning.
Start from the beginning.
That's it. Start from the beginning and talk to me like I'm a child.
There you go. I like it. Let's go with
that.
Give me
the simple version. I don't need all of that.
Yeah,
okay, but you know what? It also reminds me of a quote that I saw. It was actually a bumper sticker that I saw.
Oh, really?
It's a bumper sticker, and I wrote it down. It said, "Believe nothing you hear. and only one half that, I'm sorry, and only one half that you see.
Wow.
So believe nothing you hear, and only one half.
Only a half of what you see.
Yep.
So what I saw on television on January the 6th, 2021 wasn't what I saw. I should only close one of my eyes and say, oh, that was a peaceful, that was I'm speechless. Now that's the time when you can say, wow.
Yep, exactly. But that's exactly, I think, what happened with even with the murder of George Floyd, because that's why it took so long to go through trial and so forth, even though you had a video, because people not necessarily believed what they saw, and they, somehow tried to justify or try to change what this narrative of what everybody is seeing on this video with their eyes. It's like that rap song. It wasn't me.
Yeah.
I know you saw me, but it wasn't me.
George Floyd, let me share this with you before we prepare for this first break. George Floyd, for those of us that are in, COVID times or in the 2020s, George Floyd for us was like Rodney King was to us when that video came out. And keep in mind the generation before them, which is the film that they're showing right now, the Emmett Till film. Keep in mind Emmett Till's photographs of him.
Women of the Movement is what that's called.
Is the Women of the Movement. That is absolutely correct. And what's interesting is it doesn't make any sense until it is on, a video or you see the photo, and it looks like we're going to have to take a break.
Yeah, we have to take a break. Let me just say that since you mentioned Women of the Movement, that is actually brings us to, we're going to do an episode on Black people homework. So remember that. All right. We'll be back right after this.
We'll be back.
For the more than 70 million people who stutter worldwide, every conversation can feel like speaking in front of a crowd. All eyes on you as you know what you want to say, but cannot seem to get the words out. Listen, SAY, the Stuttering Association for the Young, aims to ignite an overdue national conversation around stuttering to raise awareness and help viewers to understand how to supportively listen to people who stutter and give them as much time as they need to speak. SAY was thrilled to be featured on NBC's Today Show, and the segment included a wonderful profile of the camp SAY. So make sure that you get in touch with SAY to find out how you can be involved in making sure that we have a safe place for those who stutter.
We're back.
Yes, we're back.
We're back. And what is it that we're talking about again? We're talking. If you just tuned in right now, we need to tell you about what we're talking about. Go ahead. What are we talking about, Lyle?
If you're listening to the podcast over somebody's shoulder, or they just let you listen while they were listening, you're listening to The Pastor and the Prince. This is a weekly podcast on the Insurrection. That's right, the Insurrection that happened January 6, 2021. How about it was a little over a year ago now that there were those who stormed the Capitol. That's right. It's the anniversary of the January 6th storming of the nation's Capitol. Sad. And most of us in the U.S. and beyond know it as the Insurrection. So we were talking about that. And while we were on the break, I did have a chance to look at who is attributed, by the way, to that quote that I love, that I saw on a bumper sticker. How about that?
Yes.
Can I share it?
Go ahead and share it.
Edgar Allan Poe in 1845. He was one credited with saying, "Believe nothing you hear, and only one half that you see."
Wow. Wow. Believe. Wow. That
There you go.
there, I was going to say, there I go with that wow again. I'll need to stop wow and go
Exactly.
with a new word. But wait, let's go back
Those are
just a
called
little
fillers.
bit. Filler words, and I want to move away from filler words. But wait, I do have something that we do need to share. And you wanted me to play a clip, a media clip that we pulled
Yeah.
from the Lincoln Project, and we wanted to
Yeah.
share this with our listening audience, and then we're going to just talk about it. We're not going to analyze it, at least not today, but we'll talk about it. So just lend us a
Actually,
listen.
before you do that clip,
Yes.
let me make a couple of points, and then actually one of the things I want to talk about actually leads into that clip. Would be really good to talk during that part of it. So if you don't mind,
Yeah, we can hold off on that.
let me share. Yeah, let me share a couple of numbers, Pastor. So 72% of Americans characterize January 6th as an event that threatened democracy.
Interesting.
And yeah, and that was a poll that was done by The Hill, and
Okay.
I saw that, and I thought it was interesting enough to share. It's kind of like there are some people who have the head in the sand phenomena, you know.
Yes.
And there was a CBS poll that showed 68 of Americans believe that it was not an isolated event. There are some people who actually believe that that this is a problem that we have in the country. This political problem. There's a problem where I even heard our former president Barack Obama
Barack
said
Obama.
that
Yes.
he would love to see a place where we could deal in politics and deal in the business of elected official without using the U.S. citizens as political footballs.
What's
And I loved hearing that analogy because that's sometimes exactly what happens, you know?
That's true. And I guess he was referring to the American version of football versus the world globally known version of football. But I think
Soccer.
both analogies, yeah, you can call it soccer or we can stick with the international name, but I think both analogies used in either sport still applies because you're kicking, the American people or, the electorate is the one that's the ones that's being kicked around the field. And you quoted that poll
For sport
from
and
CBS
for point.
for 68% of Americans, right? That was from your CBS. And by the way, for those that are curious to know where we're, receiving this information, you can contact us at podcast@yahogo.org, and we'll send you, the resources that we were referencing in today's podcast so that we can continue the discussion even further if you'd like some additional information. So again, just send us an email at podcast@yahogo.org if you wanted to know, where are we getting this information? Because sometimes, when you're online, you want to know where they're getting it from. What type of slant was it? Was it a right slant? Was it a left slant? Or was it just an objective critical thinker that provided the information? And I like what you said about Barack Obama and this being a potentially ongoing political problem. Was there something else that Mr. Obama said that was interesting, or anyone else?
Well, I think that even beyond other people thinking along those same lines, it's interesting to know that we may even have listeners that's a part of that 33% that believe that it's an isolated circumstance. Like we never had a problem before, and they're of the kind of the head in the sand where it's like, we don't have a racial problem. We don't have a problem with race, class, ethnicity, gender bias, sex. We don't have those problems in our country. We do have a good country, and it's a promised land, so to speak. We are home and land of the free.
So let's pause right there. But wait, let me interject there. We do have the promised land. If you want to look at America, think of it this way, and I share this with even people that I work with at my place of employment. If you look at it from a lens that is one big fat opportunity waiting for you to take advantage of the opportunity that's available, then it is. However, you also have to be aware that there is a system that's already established that was not necessarily meant for your success. and it can be interrupted at any time. And as long as you're aware of that, it is an opportunity, but it's also an opportunity for you to find out the reality.
That's true. That's very true. It's an opportunity to find out the reality, and it's an opportunity for you to see the reality and not make it your reality too.
Exactly, because your reality becomes very eye-opening once you step through that door.
Yeah, it's like the scripture that says that a prophet is not without honor,
save in his own country.
And I was telling people, I said, every scripture doesn't have to apply to you, because I never experienced that. In my hometown, I was very supported as an artist. I was very supported as a radio announcer. New Orleans supported me all the way. My family supported me. My church supported me. So I really didn't get to experience that whole concept of a prophet is not without honor, except in his own country. It's like everywhere else he goes, he has honor. He's without honor in his own place. I didn't experience that.
And you have to add "and house," because that's when you finish out that text, it'll say that. So that's you're not, and basically what they're saying is they're taking you for granted. And there are many that can say that, yes, when I'm at home, I am taken for granted. Oh no, we have to wrap it up. Oh no, is it time for another?
We've got to take a break.
Oh, we got to take a break. No.
Yeah, we got to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to hear that clip that we had, and we're going to talk about something else that involves that clip.
Some of the loneliest times of the year are the holidays. This statement is confirmed by Dr. Michael J. Formica, who writes in an article for Psychology Today. For a vast majority of us, the holiday seasons is about friends, family, and connection. For those who stand outside of that connection, whether as an introvert, a singleton, or someone who is socially anxious, or someone whose circumstances leaves him, her, or them without a sense of place, the experience of loneliness can be greatly amplified. Mental health, friends and family, is a human problem that does have solutions for those who need and seek them out. Hi, this is Pastor Tim of the Pastor and the Prince podcast, encouraging you to contact your healthcare provider if you're feeling lonely, anxious, or having symptoms of depression. Remember, we care about you. We're back.
We're back again. That's right. And we're talking about the insurrection.
Talking about the resurrection.
The insurrection.
The insurrection. Yes, okay, we want to get in versus riz.
Yes.
Definitely.
And talking about insurgency. What happened on January 6th was insurgency. 6th. There were Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol. Majority of Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, attempting to overthrow the government and change the election that had just happened. The election results, they were not satisfied with it.
That's correct.
So that's what actually happened.
And that too was fake news, yes?
And that's what some said. Yeah, yes. Certain networks says it was fake news.
Well, but, let me say this, and I thought this was a very interesting point that the president brought up in his recent speech as they were reflecting on what happened on January the 6th.
Which president?
Our current president, President Biden.
Okay.
During one of his recent speeches, one of the things that he said that I thought was very interesting, and something tells me that one of his staff personnel brought this out, and they had to be a critical thinker on this one. And it makes us as Americans, we should pause and say, that does have some, valid points. And he brought up the ballot. He said, how is it that only one line on the ballot was inaccurate, but all of the other lines were accurate? And when he made the statement, I said, I wonder how
Wow.
many Americans caught. And that's one of those
Mm.
wow moments. But when he said that, I said,
Yeah.
you really have to be a critical thinker to ask yourself, how is it that when you fill out a ballot, the only thing is wrong is
Hmm.
the one major ticket item? Everything else was
Mm.
accurate, because you'll notice
Yeah.
that, there were some who weren't doing well, etc.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And it's really, that's a really interesting point, because I never really thought about that. It's like, if one part is inaccurate, then there's a great part of the rest of it that should
That's
be
going to be
inaccurate. It's
inaccurate.
like,
It
yeah, it's
should.
like, yeah, it's like taking one part of the document and saying somebody tampered with this, and we can't believe it because they tampered with it, but we can believe this part because we agree with this part. So
Exactly.
nobody tampered with this part because we agree with this part, but the part we don't agree with, somebody tampered with it. So that, just throw that out.
And,
Throw that out.
and and that's something that, and again, that's one of those critical thinking moments where you have to ask
Hmm.
yourself, if you're just one of those that says, well, I don't believe the Republicans and I don't believe the Democrats, but I do
Yeah.
believe things that make sense. In this case,
Well,
you can say it's not even science, it's just thinking.
hmm well, it was one thing you said. You said the Democrats and the Republicans. It's interesting because there was a poll that was done by the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and it showed where it's not necessarily a Democrat versus Republican concept or issue or even disagreement, because they found out that in the concept of how to describe the visitors of the Capitol that day, the visitors
Hmm.
to the Capitol, how different people describe who they were. Because of course, I have to stop and, well, I'll say this after I make my point. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I was
I'm
going to
gonna
say,
I'm
go
gonna
ahead
talk
and
about,
make your
if there
point,
were
because
certain other people that had stormed the Capitol, they would be automatically described by
they will be
everybody
described by
as,
everybody as
yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
else. And you're going
Yeah,
back to a
yeah,
color
yeah. But
situation.
I'm gonna get back to that. I'm gonna get back to
Yeah,
that.
and
So okay, so this poll says that
okay.
2/3 of the Democrats believe that perfect descriptions for those are insurrectionists,
Hmm.
white nationalists, or
Ooh,
rioters.
those are some very difficult words to deal with. I like when
Um,
they refer to them as peaceful protesters. Now think,
mm,
if you're on the Republican
well,
side, or if you're on the
now
some.
that's 2/3 of the Democrats.
Oh, 2/3. Okay, so there is a
two
third that
thirds,
may call them
yeah,
something
two
else.
thirds of the Democrats. Okay, now
Makes
on the
sense.
Republican side,
Okay.
the same poll from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, the same poll says that 62% of the Republicans, a little more than half, characterize them or describe them as protesters. So there you go, the peaceful protesters.
Yeah, the peaceful
So then you
protesters.
got like, yeah, then you got like 38% who still side with the 2/3 of the Democrats, and then 1/3 of the Democrats who side with the 62% of Republicans.
Yes. Now,
So
now,
it's not necessarily a Republican versus Democrat type of deal. You
yeah.
know,
Now,
it's
one thing
not so partisan.
it's not as partisan as we or some may have pushed the narrative that it
Hmm.
is. Here's one thing that
Yeah.
I found that was interesting. I was reading an article from CNN, and at the
Hmm.
caption of the article it says, "Mom who brought 14-year-old son to the U.S. Capitol riot sentenced to jail." And my thoughts, first of all,
Whoa.
my heart went out to the mom. And
Whoa.
then I asked same question or similar questions that the judge asked. Why would you take a 14-year-old to a rally like this? Now, I think
I'll,
the thought might have been with the judge, knowing that it could get violent. Why would you take a
mm,
14-year-old there? But it could have been that she didn't have a babysitter. I don't know. What are your
mm.
thoughts on that?
Well, my thought is more of, I think of my side of it, because there are certain things that I want, and we can talk about this during Black people homework. But I think, in terms of, there are certain things that I want my son to know. There are certain things that I want my son to know the reality of. So I understood on the flip side of it why parents brought their teenagers and their small children to the Black Lives Matter rally. So if they believe what they believe with the insurrectionists, if they believe what they believe, the white nationalists, and they want to bring their children up in the same mindset that they have
I to bring them along.
That mother would say, you need to see what's going on and you need to be a part of this movement because this is very important, because they believe in what they believe in. I can respect the fact that she believed in it so much that she wanted to show her son what's going on, you know?
Well, going back to your point, when you mentioned going to the Black Lives Matter, you know, and you can actually take it back to the March on Washington. You can take it back to when Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement, when they had, in certain cases, children on the front lines. And the only reason I'm making that statement is because there's photos of dogs looking as if they're ready to attack young children because of, you know, where they were strategically placed. So I'm not too hard on this woman, but I was just reflecting on something that the judge said to the woman. He said law enforcement had weapons and some of the rioters had weapons. Now, this is the judge's word. The judge says, this isn't like a school or a tourist trip. I don't understand, but I sincerely hope he's all right. And then he continued to you know, go on to say, suggesting that it could have been a traumatic event for the young lad of 14 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is the judge when he's, you know, turning out the sentence, and, you know, he's talking to.
He sounds like he's being sympathetic and empathetic.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too.
And he's showing care about the child as well, about the minor.
Exactly.
But Pastor, I want to be fair. I do want to play that clip, but I want to get to the question that you asked at the very beginning.
Yes.
But let's get to that clip.
Let's get to
one
the
of
clip.
The things that we're talking about is how they describe them.
Yes. Now,
so it's really interesting that in the description, sometimes people flip sides also.
And wait a minute. So I want you to set up the script. So who are the voices that they're going to hear? So you have to know this is the Lincoln Project.
Yeah.
So this is not our material. This is their material. So YouTube, don't get on us. We're just playing something that's already out in public domain.
Exactly. So we don't own the rights to this. We're only reserving the rights to critique and to be media persons to do this. All right. So don't pull our soundbite down just because we play it. All right. So this is, you'll hear Mitch McConnell and some of his colleagues. Mitch McConnell is minority leader of the U.S. Senate. And there are some other members of the Senate who described and who rebuked the actions and behavior of January 6th on the day that it happened, when they were able to reconvene in the Capitol. Listen to this.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it.
The violence, destruction, and chaos we saw earlier was unacceptable, undemocratic, and un-American.
The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instructions of their president.
But nobody has a right to become a mob.
A mob was assaulting the Capitol in his name.
The Capitol was in chaos. Police officers were attacked. Guns were drawn on this very floor.
These criminals were carrying his banners, hanging his flags, and screaming their loyalty to him.
And we all should stand united in condemning the mob together.
Now, the clip that you heard was Mitch McConnell and some of his colleagues in the U.S. Senate. And I thought it was really interesting that last year around this time, right after the January 6th storming of the Capitol, of the U.S. Capitol, what actually happened was them referring to it as morally, the then President Trump was morally responsible for what had happened.
He was responsible.
They even referred to it as chaos. They referred to it as unacceptable. And if you hear the words of those same individuals from the Senate today, as I mentioned, that 62% of Republicans actually refer to them as peaceful protesters. Pastor?
Yes, I'm sitting here laughing because on one segment here, I lost my battery power to my laptop. So we're now doing this blind, so we won't be able to see each other. But I think we can feel each other as far as what the next person is about to say and what they're about to do. But this was a great segue to answer that question. Who should be held accountable for this peaceful protest, or what some or others may have referred to as a riot that occurred on the 6th of January 2021. And one of the things I was going to ask the question was, okay, who's accountable? Is it the politicians that are accountable? Is it the media that's accountable? Is it the foreign governmental interest? Or is it the ignorance of the people? I was reading another article where another young person, he was pretty much hauled into court. Why? Young man of 18 years old. He's from a small town called Milton, Georgia. And believe it or not, unfortunately for him, he's a treehouse builder. If you want to know, this one is from NPR. He's a treehouse builder. I don't want to call out his name specifically because he's only 18, and they said he's an innocent young man who got caught up in the misinformation that he was reading on social media. And this is why I'm asking these questions. Who is accountable for this? Because this stuff, it's almost unfair. Go ahead.
Well, in your list of who could be responsible, I think there are lots of people. I think the list would be so long that we would not be able to put it in place, because I'd like to talk about one other thing. That News One had an interesting report that the Chief Justice, his wife, Clarence Thomas,
Clarence Thomas,
U.S. Chief Justice, and Clarence Thomas, if you do not know, he's an African American in the United States.
He actually replaced my hero, Thurgood Marshall. Yes, go ahead.
He's a black man who married a Caucasian woman. Okay, so he has a white wife.
Wait, and stop the presses.
Paid.
He married a white woman. I didn't know. Go ahead.
Yeah, he married a white woman, and she, the caption on News One says that she gleefully cheered on the white supremacists at the Capitol, and she paid for 70 buses, 70 buses, 310, as the Bible says, 70 buses used to transport armed rioters to the rally. And on January 9th last year, her Facebook page was shut down because Mrs. Ginny Thomas was gleefully cheering the white supremacists at the Capitol. So I would say, and here's the thing. So the Chief Justice is somebody who actually is paid by the U.S. citizens, is paid by our tax dollars.
Tax dollars.
Thoughtcode.com says that the 2021 annual salary of the Chief Justice set by Congress is $280,500, slightly higher than the $268,000 and some change of the associate justices, but that's irrelevant. I digress. His salary is paid for by the American people. He has a wife who paid for 70 buses to transport armed rioters, armed insurrectionists.
I have to insert here. I have to insert here. Sir. Just a moment. Give me just a moment. Listen,
I'm just saying.
That is a lot of money. Now, we don't know what it costs to charter a bus, but I like when you said there was, 310 if you're talking biblical, and it's basically 70 buses, but something tells me that that's not cheap. The second piece here is they must, something tells me they may not have children. Because if she's sleeping with a black man and she's had a black man's baby, but she's supporting, those that may be white nationalists, she'll have to ask herself, what does she think her child is? But maybe her child is
What does she think her husband is?
Well, I was wondering the same thing, but I didn't want to, point out, Captain Obvious.
That's all right. I'll point it out.
Go ahead. But yeah, those are just two things that stuck in my mind there as you were just sharing that information from Information One.
So my answer to you is that to answer that question, I think part of the answer in terms of who should be held accountable, I'd like to use the very words of those that have supported, the whole thing in recent times. But when they first mentioned, they rebuked the behavior of them, like Mitch McConnell and his colleagues there in the Senate. I'd like to use their terms and say that Trump is morally and absolutely responsible, and his supporters are responsible for the chaos and is unacceptable. Those were their words.
Those were their words. But remember, also, but I want you to go back to your quote.
One other thing.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'd also like to say that to answer your question, who should be held accountable or who's responsible, I think that the list is too long as we see some news coming out like Mrs. Ginny Thomas. I think the list is too long to say who's responsible. True.
But let me go back to something that you started out the top of the show, your original quote. Mm-hmm. And this is what happens with people. They believe nothing that they hear. So although these gentlemen stood up either on the day of or the day after, we've learned what? Believe nothing that you hear. And then as you finish out the quote, and only half of what you see. So what we saw them do, we're only to believe half. What we thought we heard on January 6, 2021 was not what we heard. And this will take me to one more quote, which is, what we've learned from history is that we've learned nothing from history. And that's why I had this question that, who should be held accountable? And we know the answer. Unfortunately,
through
because
deductive reasoning, I think we do.
Yes, through deductive reasoning and through realities that we've already lived through. So any of you that have been on the planet for any amount of time, as you know that there is, certain systems that are in place so that certain people can have a justice. And one of the things I was going to add to that is justice has been served to some of the rioters. Some of them had to spend time in the local jails, or I believe most of these are federal acts. And what I've learned from my brothers and sisters who've had to spend any time in the penal system, anytime you get a federal charge, there isn't any of this, you only spend half of the time on the charge and then you get out for good behavior. They said, no, you spend a majority of that time that they give you. So if they give you 4 years, you're spending very close to the 4 years, if not all 4 years incarcerated. That's just one of those, if it's a federal charge, they're getting you. So a lot of these people that they're going after, they're going to have federal charges. And, I guess they should be listed as a felon. I don't know. I don't know if felons are allowed to vote, but I'm sure if they're not, they will give these individuals the opportunity to vote again because that's the system that's built for them. Thoughts?
Right. Yep. Exactly. Well, Pastor, we actually are out of time. We're actually a little over time, but I think it warranted us talking about this a little bit more.
Very important topic.
So I know our listeners appreciate us being very thorough and spending a few more minutes just pointing out the things that we mentioned so that, we're not just talking in the wind. So hopefully. And if you like some of the bibliography, if you like some of the sources that we got these from so that that we didn't get these ourselves, you can email us podcast@yahogo.org and get in touch with us. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you think of the show. And if you have any show ideas, please let us know.
Please let us know.
Yes. So we're going to end it. Is that it? Are you?
That's it for me. We thank you for joining us at The Pastor
and the Prince
podcast. Thank you and have a wonderful day.